Germany, the largest economy in Europe and once a powerful growth engine of the global economy, is now facing growing concerns as warnings about its economic slowdown continue to emerge. As Germany, long considered the linchpin of the European continent, shows the signs of strain, uncertainty is spreading across Europe as well. To delve deeper into this topic, we are joined by Frederic Spohr, a journalist from Germany and the director of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation Korea office. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So now, talk about Germany. Once heralded as a paragon of economic success in Europe, now it is facing some symptoms of economic slowdown, and some observers argue that perhaps these troubles can be attributed to the leadership of Chancellor Scholz. How do you see this perspective?
Well, I think we need to dig a little bit deeper. So the current issues that the German economy has and the roots of it, I think they are already older and they last longer than the term of our Chancellor Olaf Scholz. In the recent 2 decades, Germany had a very supportive environment globally. So we had cheap oil, cheap energy from Russia. Then, of course, we had a more and more globalizing world. We had the boom in China, where German companies benefit a lot of it, right? We sold machinery to China, a lot of cars. Now China is facing a slowdown, or at least a slower growth. Then, of course, we had the peace dividend. We didn't have to invest much in our defense, in our military. This has also changed. This environment that has been very supportive has changed now, and now we really feel the symptoms. The growth has been slow already in the last years, but now what we also see is that the slow growth is affecting the labor market. So in recent years, companies were very cautious to lay off staff because we have a lack of skilled labor. But this has changed now because apparently the issue has become so seriously.
Like you said, the troubles may not be within the realm of political leadership because these are the root causes of all the slowdown of the economy. However, some still argue that the crisis management skill is maybe the problem. And how can you assess the current leadership's crisis management skill compared to the past?
Well, I think the past leadership under Chancellor Merkel, it maybe was a bit too complacent because everything was running okay because of this favorable environment. But of course, if an economy is into crisis, this has, of course, to do with the current leadership and the past leadership. When it comes to Olaf Scholz, I think it has become clear now that certain action needs to be taken, and he was too cautious to take it. So if you ask economists in Germany, it's actually pretty clear what needs to be done. So we would need to have a more flexible labor market. There would need to be more incentives for people to take jobs. We would need a more pragmatic approach towards energy policy. We need less regulation, more flexibility. So in the recent 2 decades, more and more has been added up, more regulation, more laws, and this has kind of slowed down the innovation of Germany, and I think this needs to be tackled and needs to be changed. The German government broke up, mostly also because of this question. The Liberal Party asked for more supply-side oriented reforms, but this was not possible under the current coalition. So there will be new elections in February, and then the German voter can decide in which direction Germany should go.
Sure. Well, then turning to a broader trend, when we look at the statistics, trade statistics of EU, we can see exports to US and export to China account for much portion of the whole trade. Then we have concerns about growing tension between US and China. How do you see the significance of this tension to the EU economy?
Well, I think this conflict is also going already for a couple of years now, the trade tensions between the US and China. And of course, this has negative effects on such an open economy as Europe is and as Germany is. So Europe is the largest trading partner for around 80 countries. If you compare that to the US, The US is only the largest trading partner for 20 countries. So Europe really depends on an open economy, an open global economy that is connected. And if there are some kind of disruptions, of course, this has a negative impact on German economies and on European economies. So far, this has been, I would say, punctual. So, for example, I'm sure you heard about the Dutch company ASML, for example. So they were affected by an export ban of high technology goods to China. That, of course, harmed their businesses. And this didn't only cause harm to the Dutch company, it also caused harm to some German companies who are the main suppliers of this Dutch company ASML. So of course trade conflicts globally, that has always a bad effect on the European economy because it is so connected to the world. And of course there is reason for concern under this new Trump administration that we'll have now, that things will become worse in the future.
Yes, let's talk about the US later, but first talk about China. During the G20 summit, President Xi met separately with the leaders from Germany and France, and he specifically mentioned talks about some kind of compromise on tariff disagreement. Do you think there is a possibility that the EU and China get together and talk more constructively about the resolving all the disagreement on tariff, for example?
Well, I think there's certainly an interest in Germany and Europe to have good trade relations with China, that's for sure. On the other side, I think Germany and Europe also needs to be cautious that we don't become too dependent on China. And this is an issue that has already been identified a couple of years ago. There is the speech of de-risking from China. So, of course, we need to be cautious, and there are some certain risks associated with trading with China. Of course, there's the economic risk. We know that sometimes they also do foul play when it comes to their trade. They have subsidies to a lot of companies. And, of course, there's also the geostrategic risk. We don't know how they will approach the Taiwan crisis. Will they become even more aggressive as they have been in the past? How they will react within the South China Sea. So these are all possible disruptions that need to be taken into, or possible disruptions that needs to be taken in account. And I think that Europe needs to be cautious and needs to have a very balanced trade policy. And that also includes not only China and the US, but also, of course, other countries, South Korea, Latin America. Currently, we are in trade negotiations with South Korea to update the current free trade agreement. We are in trade negotiations with Latin America to close this trade agreement. So I think it's very important for the European economy to be very resilient, yes, and to have to diversify its supply chains and also its export markets.
Yes, of course, there are many actors in play, but let's talk about the US, especially the second Trump administration. Because during the campaign season, President-elect Trump mentioned imposing universal tariff of at least 10%. How do you view the significance of this policy to the EU economic performance?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a threat. As just mentioned, Europe is a very open economy, and disruptions in tariffs are always harmful for the European economy. I think the strategy of Europe will be first to get into talks with Trump, right, and try to find somehow a deal. Offer him something. So already there are talks of maybe we can offer the US to buy more gas, for example, right? That could be one option. I think if that measure, that announced measure of Trump really will come into place, there are calculations among European think tanks that this could cost up to 1% of the European GDP. So it's definitely a threat. So I think we should try to find a solution and also try to accompany also the demands of the US. I think Europe really needs to try to avoid escalation of the trade tensions. On the other side, I also think that Trump is not almighty, right? And of course, he made this announcement now of those 10%, but he will realize that his own companies or the companies in the US and the American citizens, they also benefit from a free trade. And there are restrictions. If you look at the economic effects of tariffs, they might lead to higher prices. That means higher inflation. If you look at the other proposed policies of Donald Trump, cutting down migration, even deporting illegal migrants, this has a very increasing effect on wages, also drives up inflation. So he has also some restrictions. I'm sure he wants the best for the American companies and for America. So I think that also means good trade relations with Europe, and I'm pretty sure he knows that.
Yes, like you said, the US should consider some potential troubles as well. But because of these concerns, it was reported that EU has already prepared some measures like appointing a transatlantic coordinator to discuss potential troubles and establishing a Trump task force, for example. So I'm wondering what kind of other measures that the EU has prepared so far.
Well, I think there are already some discussions what could be offered to Donald Trump, for example, buying more gas. That's something, by the way, that also worked under the last Trump administration. Actually, what happened that the surplus that is so much criticized by Donald Trump, the trade surplus of the EU towards US has increased. So his measures actually didn't work that much, also because Europe offered him something that he finally took. I think if we look at a more general approach, I think Europe really needs to be careful of one strategy of Trump, and that is he links security policy with economic interest, and that creates leverage against Europe. We've seen that already now. His incoming Vice President Vance, he treated that if the EU is regulating X, or formerly Twitter, the social media platform, if this is going to be strongly regulated by the EU, US will pull out of NATO. I mean, actually nothing has to do with each other, but they use this, their leverage that they have on security on the EU as something to pursue their own economic interest. And I think this is something dangerous, and to be prepared from this, I think Europe needs to be more independent when it comes to defense and when it comes to its own military. So if we want to be Trump-proof, I think we really will need to invest more in our own security. By the way, that's also something that Donald Trump is actually demanding, so maybe we will find a solution here.
Yes, there are also some experts speculating that these tariff threats can be part of U.S. strategy, because it is President Trump, right? So it can be aiming at encouraging the EU to be on the U.S. side in countering China in the future. So how do you see the merit in this strategy, if that is realized?
I mean, I'm not able to look inside Donald Trump's head. I don't know his strategy. I'm not even sure if he has a strategy, right? I think I would agree on the point that America and the EU needs to cooperate. I also think that China might be the bigger threat when it comes to the economy, but of course also when it comes to security. So of course Europe and America need good relations, and we need to cooperate and find a common strategy how to deal with China. That not only includes the US and Europe, that also includes other players, actors like Japan, South Korea. I think we need to find a way how we will address the more and more aggressive behavior of China. However, I think that even though Europe, America, and South Korea have overlapping interests, the interests are not completely similar. So I think that Europe needs to be strong and also have a lot of self-esteem to pursue its own interest, together with their partners, together with America, together with South Korea, to find a common line that is in the interest of all countries, America, EU, Japan, South Korea.
Yes, of course, there are many areas of cooperation between the EU and South Korea as well. It'll be very fascinating to see how we use lessons learned from the past and craft a very resilient policy in the future. Thank you for your insight, and let's wrap up for today.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.